So make yourself comfortable in your chair. Just move back a bit so you can see my feet. So feet down, sitting up in your chair, and I usually start just rubbing your hands together. Tapping over your face. And over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. And your arm. The other side. Part of your chest. Your belly. Remember, these tapping exercises are good thing, good way of actually starting the day. They're very gentle, and as you've doubtless heard me say before, it's quite reasonable to suppose that you do them. You can do them in your bed before you get up in the morning. Do them seated. You can do them standing. It's just a useful habit to get into, particularly on these chilly mornings that we're getting. Before you do anything too strenuous, and that includes kind of like feeding the cat or anything like that. Just preparing your body, and also just giving you that sense of focusing into yourself. Sitting back, letting your weight drop back, feeling the support of the chair for your back. And just letting your attention come to rest in your body. And just think a little bit more about your breathing. So as always, when I talk about the breathing, it's done with what I would describe as a light touch. If something isn't working for you, don't think, well, I must concentrate on this. Just think about something else, and just sort of pick what works for you out of this. So, some people aren't comfortable focusing on the breathing. Some of us, it's a useful thing. For others, you can sort of dip in and out of it. So that support for your back is important, because in this position, just place your hands on your belly and see if you can feel a slight rise and fall there as you breathe in and down. And if you can't, just for a few rounds, don't do it too many times, deliberately push your belly out. And you'll also feel that your back is pushing back a little bit. It's not a big movement here. And like most movements, it will build up through your body. So now bring your hands to the solar plexus just underneath your rib cage, and same thing again. See if you can feel the movement there. It's usually a bit more obvious here. And see if you can also notice that as you breathe in and your hands are pushed up, it's not just the front of the body, it's the whole of the body. So your back pushes against the chair a little bit. And then when you've got an idea of that, move one hand back down to the first position. And now what you want to try and do is to feel the movement in the lower hand just before in the upper hand. So it's a bit artificial doing this, but it's a good way of getting the idea of this abdominal breathing. So you breathe in, the belly pushes out, then the solar plexus, and then that reverses on the out breath. But you don't even have to do it with the in breath, because I think once you've created space, you'll find that you're naturally breathing in at that point. You could take it a stage further and go to the chest, but these are the essential things. Good. And then just relax. You can also do that exercise on the floor. If you do that, have your feet flat so your knees are up, and again you've got the floor supporting your back. And some people do it, they put a book there and there and there, just so they can feel the weight that they're trying to push against. Whichever way you choose to do it, don't be too forceful. Just do a few, and gradually you'll develop the awareness of how your body is doing that, and you'll start to remember it. And when we come to an upright position, whether it's seated or whether it's standing, we don't have the direct support for our back, unless you've got a cushion behind there, but let's assume that you haven't. So any kind of pushing from the back will have to go down. And this is one of the reasons why it's quite difficult to reproduce what we call abdominal breathing or bellows breathing in an upright stance. Another reason is to have it that all of us have inherited, really, which is a tendency to pull our belly in when we go up straight. And we don't want to do that. We want to feel the same amount of space here when we're upright as we do when we're sitting back. We don't need to tighten up there. We need good muscle tone. It's not just that the muscles are loose and floppy, but we don't need to pull in, if you see what I mean. I mean, it might be appropriate to pull in if you're doing a particular exercise to strengthen the abdominal muscles, but that's really so that as you go about your daily life, you're not pulling your belly in, but you've got that muscle tone. So although we want to try and reproduce that same build up of the breath through your body in the upright position, it's going to be a bit more difficult. And sometimes we can approach it from the opposite way around. In other words, what we can do is, rather than try and get our posture right to make the breathing correct, we think about the breathing, and obviously you need to practice that a little bit in the reclining position or flat on your back. You kind of remember that, and like a lot of stuff that we remember in Tai Chi, your body will begin to adjust to allow you to do that. But it's this idea of allowing space for the lungs to drop down and for the lungs to fill up more. We use something, I think it was something like 40% of our lung capacity in any one in-breath. So there's plenty of scope there for more air to get into your lungs, although it would never be 100%. So just turning your head a little bit. One of the very early, I'm talking getting on for 2,000 years, one of the early characters for the term chi, it looks a bit like a mouth with the out breath coming out, kind of water vapor coming out on the out breath, which has led to a definition of the chi for some people as the vital breath. And whether that's sort of like strictly accurate or not is beside the point. It's just that our energy levels have long been associated with our breathing for obvious physiological reasons. You know, it's the most basic chemical reaction, the most basic energetic reaction, breathing oxygen into your system that can then be used in essentially the burning to produce energy. And also the release of carbon dioxide, the stagnant breath. Then your hands in front of your shoulders. Breathing cycles can be variable, is one thing to start, and we don't want to force our body to breathe in a certain way. Ideally, we just allow the body to develop the synchronicity between movement, breath, and so on and so forth. But we can think about the breathing patterns a little bit. And here, for instance, as your elbows go up, you feel an expansion in your body, a natural in-breath, if you like. If you turn that the other way around, you breathe in, and it's almost like a wave coming up underneath your elbows to push them up. Try that a couple of times, but don't have the expectation that you're always going to have the exact breathing pattern. There's too many variables to guarantee that. but it can be a good way of checking in every now and then change the direction. Now bring your hands down to your sides and winding your hands around. And this too can be associated with your breathing. Though it's quite a small movement, we get that opening across there. And in fact, just there, in front of the shoulder, is an acupuncture point, which is lung 1. And it's a key acupuncture point for our lungs. And hence, obviously quite closely associated with our breathing. So once again, here, as you get that opening, principally in the front of the body, it's a natural sort of spot to breathe in. As I said, what I generally do is every now and then I bring my attention to my breathing, and generally speaking, I find that it's harmonizing quite well with everything else. If it's not, I might choose to try and do something about it, or I might not. Depends on the exercise, and well, it depends how fast you're doing an exercise on any particular day or whatever. And then winding around. We can also use our breathing as the focal point for imagery. So for instance, we can imagine that we're actually breathing up through the soles of our feet and into our legs, and from there into the belly, which obviously is not the actual physical process. But again, this interaction between mind and body, between, if you like, breath and movement can take place. And by imagining that we can breathe up or direct the breath to a part of the body where it wouldn't normally go, we're actually facilitating taking our attention there, that the other way. So sometimes people talk about breathing into areas that are a bit stiff, that are a bit tight, breathing out the tension, the stiffness with the out breath. So we get that feeling of releasing, which is very, very similar to the feeling of relief we get. If we take a big exercise, we've just done something very difficult, and we go, oh, thank goodness that's over, sort of thing. That kind of releasing feeling is one that we're looking for in those areas that are a bit stiff and a bit tight. Resting your hands on your legs, easing forwards and pushing back. Now here, as we go forwards, a little bit of a press on the belly, so we might expect quite naturally that would be an out breath. So therefore, as we come back up, it's like your body's inflating. If you've ever watched something like a bouncy castle starting up, it starts off as this flat sheet on the ground, and then they start pumping the air in, and it start poking up. And in the same way, you can almost imagine that if you're able to breathe in here comfortably, you sort of, it fills the body up and brings you to the upright, which is obviously, again, there's a bit of imagery involved in that. But it adds another dimension to this process of coming into the upright position, as well as obviously pushing from the legs, pulling from the hips, all the usual stuff. Another thing is also that when you're going forwards, you may feel a tightness in your back, and the breathing out can help to release that. And then turning a little. Our breath can also be a sort of interface between inner and outer, although a lot of the attention is paid to what's going on within the body. We don't exist in isolation from our environment. and the air that we breathe in and out. It's a very obvious sort of conduit for that sort of awareness. Turn the other way. And then turn around. And then back in the other direction. Good. And then straight onto one side, feeling that side of your body adjusting to support you. Raise the opposite heel and step forward, heel, toes, and then step back. Pushing down just a little bit through that foot that's still fixed to the floor and through the hip on that side. Change over. And alternating. So now you're going to put the foot flat down each time so you can push down gently and almost like your feet on a seesaw. You push down on one end of the seesaw, the other end comes up. Good, and bring your feet back. So now into here and winding your hands out again. And again, if it suits you, take a breath in. So now you go forward, breathing out if you're following the breathing, and back again. And this pattern of breathing in when we come to the upright position here, and then breathing out as we go forward. It's the same pattern for all of the first set of exercises where we're very much engaged with this forwards and backwards movement. Now this time, as you come back, letting your hands trail behind, take a breath in, and as you go forward, again, using a bit of imagery as though you could breathe out through your fingers. And just have this sense of very gently reaching out a little bit. And again, there's this thing about the inner and the outer environment. Although it's an internal arc, we also push out a little bit, just very gently into that space immediately around us. And so it's as though we're breathing in through our fingertips to just push them into that space gently. And remember though, that basic breathing method is referred to as bellows breathing sometimes. And with the bellows, you'd pull the handles apart, you'd fill the bellows bag up with air, and then we'll squeeze together and push the air out through the nozzle in the direction we wanted it to go. So a similar sort of pattern going on here. Once again, just a way of linking up, of uniting body, mind, and movement. One more time. And coming over. Rolling the ball towards the chest. Every now and then, remembering to check in with the breathing, perhaps just focusing on the in-breath as you sit back and gather in the energy. One more time, coming over the top. This time, let your hands just come down in front of your hips, elbows going out slightly, and then draw your fingers back, palms pressing forwards, and then pull back. Pigeon spreads its wings. Now this is a good one for the breathing. I've had people say that they found that this one in particular they find is I suppose because of the way the chest is worked here, but very helpful for breathing. It reminds me of a couple of movements that we do in Chinese massage for the same reason, to help to just open the chest. Of course, when you're doing it in a massage sense, somebody's doing it for you, which is just lovely. So again, this could be a good one. If you're interested in working with your breath, I would recommend this one. Don't forget this image of moving through water as well, though, so don't get too stuck on one thing. And here, as you go forward, it's almost like you've still got the ball there, and you're just really squeezing your hands around the ball. So giving it a slightly stronger feeling. And that too, that when we exert ourselves like that, we tend to take up a breath in beforehand, because we breathe in and we kind of squeeze in. And I'm not suggesting it should be anything like that sort of hard-edged. It's a much softer quality in Tai Chi, but still that principle there. The same when you go into pushing away. So you can actually breathe in to the palms of your hands. And then your hands lower down a little. Come back. Rotate your arms and see if you can feel that same opening in the sides of the chest as we felt earlier. And of course, these very subtle movements, it won't be the big muscles of the chest, they'll be engaged, but not so much. But smaller groups of muscles, less used activity with with muscle in general, whether it be different muscle or the same muscle. Sort of building behind the movement. So, you know, we were using, say, pigeon spreads its wings to give us that feeling of expanding movement in the chest, and we associate that with the in-breath. There's that same or similar sort of opening here as we go back. See if you can just relate to that a little bit. So, of course, the breathing pattern, if you want, it will come down to an in-breath as you come back, and out-breath as you look forwards. One more going forwards and then going back to pigeon spreads its wings. The little sequence. Remember that opening and closing of the chest. And see if you can feel the echoes of that with the other two movements. And now going into pushing away. The elbows come out, the chest opens a little bit. And you push forwards. Hands come down. Arms rotate, chest opens, even small, even more subtle than in pushing away. So now just remind yourself of the bigger movement. The pigeon spreads its wings. And then back to pushing a wave. Above all else, don't hold your breath at any point. So, you know, if you're finding that you get out of sync between breath and movement, again, focus your attention elsewhere in the exercise. Or, you know, if you're still wanting to keep breath and movement in coordination, move at the pace that you're comfortable breathing, not the other way around. I think this is the last time. And hands out a little bit further. Now flatten your hands down, wind back, and then polishing the table. Turning and sweeping around. So here, come back, start the in breath and breathe out. Slightly longer out breath, so they're not always even in length. So because you're breathing out a little bit more than you're breathing in, you're not going to run out or anything. But again, you are just clearing out the lungs a little bit. One more time. Now, Pressing your hands down and pushing up, your body expanding and contracting. So again, the in breath and the out breath will follow that pattern. Remember, you're pushing down through your feet, through your hips. So this is one of those occasions when that image of breathing up through your legs might actually prove to be a useful image. And then change into the wild goose. So that idea, breathing in through your legs and up into your belly and then in and into your chest, changing now to heart in the crowd, might actually help with your arms going up smoothly, not straining in your shoulders, because even though you're not actually physically breathing in through your legs and so on, your attention will be there. It will help to just engage your legs in the whole process. This is something that is more noticeable, of course, in the standing exercises, but it's worth referring to that every now and then if it works for you in the seated. And then dragon plucks the stars from the sky. So now, of course, if we're still following those ideas with the breath from one side, okay, you're not going to just breathe in through one side of your body, but both lungs will fill up. But it's a matter of guiding your attention. So your attention, your thoughts can kind of ride on your breathing sometimes. And that makes the breath a useful focus for meditation, for quieting your mind, either by counting your breath or by following your breath. And generally, when we do that, we find the breathing settled into a nice, smooth rhythm, and it has a very calming effect on the mind. There's a book going around. I've never read the book actually, but I think it's got a great title. It's about Buddhist meditation. And the book's called Breath Sweeps Mind. And this idea of our breath sweeping the mind clean is quite an interesting one. So we've gone from the physical qualities, the physiology, if you like, of breathing, into how breath, mind, movement, and imagery, all those things begin to synchronize. And then with both hands on the round in front. This time, adding the turn. And now 4 stages to the movement. Extend 1 foot, knees still a little bent, scoop in the sea, look at the sky. And then rolling your fingers into a hollow fist, grasping the tiger's ears. You'll notice that when we do this, there's a similar kind of rotation as when we do bird folds its wings, this movement here, opening the chest. So again, that would facilitate an in-breath and an out-breath as you go forwards. Good. And then on the other side. So I'm choosing to just focus on your breathing a little bit. And as you know, I don't often do that. I don't do that sort of like every class, certainly. And I tend to not do it too much with people who are new because, as I say, not everybody is comfortable. And breathing, posture and movement are very linked in with each other. And if you try and force the breathing, which we should never do, but there can be a temptation to do that, and your breathing and your posture aren't sort of appropriate, you can create tension, stiffness in the body. And then going the other way and grasping the tiger's ears. One of my main teachers doesn't teach the breathing at all. I think once in over 20 years of working with him has he offered anything in particular about our breathing, apart from don't forget to breathe. His teacher, Grandmaster Chen Xiaowang, doesn't teach breathing patterns at all, whereas others do. You know, so there's a spectrum of views being put in now about how vital. But I had another teacher, a Chinese teacher, who, having taught me a rather complicated sequence of movements, they insisted that I did the exact breathing pattern that he thought was necessary. So I'm kind of somewhere between those extremes. I think it can be useful some of the time for some people, but you know, don't think it's a massive failure if you don't quite get everything about the breath. Once again, rubbing your hands together and tapping over your face. Over your head and neck. Down to one shoulder. The other side. Upper part of the chest. Belly. And then your legs. Okay, and then standing. So you might want to think about that abdominal breathing when you come to standing. Interestingly, sometimes in pain management techniques, they would teach you deeper breathing. And I asked somebody about this, and they said, because actually sometimes when you try for that deeper breathing, you actually encourage the body to relax, which of course is the opposite way around to what I was saying. Some people breathe. This goes to show we're not all the same. It's picking what's appropriate. But it might be that, you know, remembering that feeling of the belly gently expanding. For people like yourself with quite a lot of experience now in Tai Chi, that might actually encourage your body to take the posture that allows that to happen. And sometimes, maybe sometimes not. So here's sinking down, and again, you might want to use that image of breathing up through your legs into your body, maybe even breathing out through the legs. Exercise rooting down. So that puts it alongside these ideas of opposite movements, the opposite movement being your feet pushing down. It's just a matter of enlarging our perspective of what is going on in the body. And all of these things should be regarded as tools. You know, in your garden shed, you might have a number of tools. You might have shears and spades and forks and just all sorts of things. And you would pick the one that suits you for what you're doing. You might have a spade or a saw or something like that that's, you paid a lot of money for, and it's the best one in the world, and it's a great one. But if what you want to do is to cut the hedge, it's not going to be much help. And a cheap pair of shears would do a better job. So, you know, depending on what you're trying to achieve and what works for you at any particular time, all of these ideas about Tai Chi can be picked off the shelf and used. And then change into the wild goose. And then part in the clouds. Even when I'm not talking about the breathing in a class, doesn't mean you can't be thinking about it, of course. They're the same exercises, but they can begin to feel quite different. And again, you use what works best for you. Good. Now, 1 foot forwards. Just move the weight a few times to remind yourself of the movement. There's no particular breathing pattern. I mean, you can do it either way around, depending on what suits you. But what you can do, I've talked about that sense of just pausing over each leg. So move your weight into one leg, rest there, and use that image of breathing up through your leg and breathing out through your leg, and then move. And again, you use the image of breathing in and breathing out, and it can really help to settle you in to that posture. And obviously that's quite a long time that we're doing that, so we wouldn't do it like that all the time. But let's try that and see again if it's useful for you. If nothing else, it will make you think about your alignment and your root. And then, of course, in the moment that you're doing that, that's when your toes and your heel come up. And then again here. So again, we're using this image of breathing up through the leg, the body filling up, to encourage the body to find its alignment and its posture over the supporting leg, and to just slow you down a little bit, so that when you come to take the step, you're not in quite such a rush. Good, now change sides. So if we begin to associate the in-breath into the belly with that settling in and the changes in posture, then that can be quite a useful thing. And we also associate it with the slowing down, the quietening, the settling. And then raising your toes and heel. Stepping in. So then taking a few steps, either forwards or backwards, move the weight forwards, rest, breathe in through the leg and out. Imagine that, and then take the step. Same thing here, go forwards, rest, breathe in and out. Imagine the breath through the leg and then the step. And going in the other direction, same thing, rest on the supporting leg. Think about the breathing if that works for you, then take the step. And then fisherman cast a net. And again, if you want to use the breathing, with that sense of your breath being one of the things that, in a way, breaks down the hard barrier that we often feel between ourselves and what's around us. It's much more diffuse than that. And you can feel that the breath trails away just as the movement trails away. But we have this sense of the space around us, the space between the feet, and so on and so forth, being very much part of the whole practice. Space that your arms are moving into. And then on the other side, Good. Go back to your chair. Another interesting, well, one that I find interesting image to use with your breathing is the quality of the breath. So there's a visualization set of images associated with this. The in-breath, when you breathe in, it will always feel fresher than the out-breath. It doesn't matter how warm it is outside. It's always just that little bit cooler. And that in-breath is likened to the feeling of a sharp, misty spring morning, the spring mist. It's very clear, quite kind of, it kind of wakes you up. The out-breath, a bit more stagnant, has a sort of grayer quality to it if you're going to associate a colour. And that's often referred to as the autumn fog. I think it's a bit of a slight on the autumn fog, actually, but you get the idea, this releasing of the stagnation. So there's this cycle of rejuvenation, which fits in with the physiology of breathing, of course. You're breathing in fresh oxygen, you're breathing out the carbon dioxide. And again, there's this sense of drawing in from the environment around you when we breathe in. So bring your hands as though you're holding a ball, and every now and then refer to the breathing. Don't feel that with this exercise you have to keep it the whole time, but an in-breath on the expansion, out-breath on the contraction. And if that image of spring mist, autumn rain works for you, make use of that. And just have a sense of gathering in, of drawing energy in to your body and then releasing it. And then make it a full circle, going over, breathing in. So you come back to the belly where the in-breath started. So this is a kind of outward looking exercise in a way, the sense of drawing in. And now we put in inside it, alternating with a smaller circle. So we've got two circles, two stages, shall we say, to the exercise. There's this sense of gathering in to this area that I've sometimes referred to as the lower dantian. And then from the belly, we feel that expansion of that fresher energy right through the body, down into the feet, up into the shoulders, and then releasing and start the whole cycle again. So you could be systematic about this and do a sort of body scan each time with the inner circle, that is, not with the outer circle. You know, maybe you think of your feet, your legs, first of all, breathing in the spring mist, breathing out the autumn fog with that fresher, tingly quality almost, then gathering in again. You start maybe thinking of your belly, south, belly, lower back, remember, spring mist, autumn fog. Slowly working up your body, interspersed each time with this gathering part of the cycle. This is an exercise called Sun and Moon, by the way. And now it's the solar plexus and chest. Gathering in again. And then arms and hands and your head. You could do it like that. You could do it just feel your whole body experiencing the change. Or the other useful thing you might want to do, if there are areas that feel particularly stiff or tight, you can imagine that you could actually breathe in that energy, that fresher energy to that particular area. Breathe out the stagnation. Whatever is appropriate for it. Do one more round of this. Then change into embrace tiger, return to mountain. Breathing for this is an in breath and then an out breath as you wrap your arms around. In breath as you draw your hands in, and an out breath as you settle. So your breathing cycle, particularly the out breath, might become one of those reference points for the quietening, the settling, as and when you need it. Another tool to hang from the rack, if you like to think of it like that. If the breathing isn't working for you, don't see it as a failure. If you maybe had just a glimpse of it, that's fine. You can practice it if it's something that you want to develop. One more round. And then rest. Lovely. Thank you as always, everybody. I hope that was interesting for you. As I say, it's only